The transport shuttle landed with a soft thud on the University of Colorado campus, kicking up a small cloud of dust that made the three alien passengers wrinkle their various facial features in disgust. Kirill stepped out first, his tall crystalline, body catching the sunlight and throwing rainbow patterns across the ground. Behind him came Reef, her blue-green skin glistening with the moisture she needed to survive, and finally Buzz, whose compound eyes scanned the area with mechanical precision. "So this is Earth," Kirill said, his voice carrying the subtle vibration that all Vorthak used when speaking. "It looks exactly as primitive as the reports suggested." Reef nodded, adjusting the small water recycler attached to her neck. "The atmospheric composition is acceptable, but the lack of proper humidity control systems is concerning. How do humans manage without environmental processors?" Buzz clicked his mandibles together, a sign of amusement among his people. Perhaps they simply accept discomfort as normal. Primitive species often lack the technology to improve their conditions. The three students represented the best and brightest of their respective civilizations. The Vorthak had conquered 17 star systems through superior technology and crystal-based computing. The Quillen controlled vast underwater cities across multiple ocean worlds. The Drex had built mechanical wonders that could reshape entire planets. All three species looked down on Earth as a backwater world barely worth studying. Dr. Rebecca Torres appeared from behind the shuttle, clipboard in hand and a knowing smile on her face. She had heard this same conversation dozens of times from visiting alien dignitaries, researchers, and now students. The confidence in their voices, the casual dismissal of human achievement, the certainty that they understood Earth before they had even begun to explore it. "Welcome to Earth," she said cheerfully. "I'm Dr. Torres, your coordinator for the Galactic Educational Consortium Exchange Program. I hope your journey wasn't too difficult." Kirill straightened to his full 7-foot height. "The journey was adequate. We are here to study human civilization and your planetary ecosystem as part of our advanced degrees in xenobiology and primitive culture studies." "Primitive culture studies?" Dr. Torres raised an eyebrow. "Interesting classification. Well, I think you'll find Earth full of surprises." The aliens exchanged glances that clearly communicated their doubts about that statement. Reef pulled out a sleek device that looked like a cross between a tablet and a microscope. "Our bioscanners have already cataloged most of your local species during the descent. Your biodiversity index is acceptable but unremarkable compared to standard garden worlds. Your technology appears functional but inefficient," Buzz added, gesturing toward the university buildings. "These structures could be improved significantly with proper engineering principles." Dr. Torres nodded thoughtfully. "I'm sure they could be. Why don't we start with a tour of the campus, and then we'll begin with some basic orientation materials." The next few hours passed exactly as the aliens expected. The university campus was quaint but obviously limited by human technological constraints. The dormitory rooms assigned to them were comfortable enough, though they required various modifications to accommodate their different physiological needs. Chiral needed a crystal resonance chamber for proper rest. Reef required a moisture-rich environment with specific mineral content in the air. Buzz needed surfaces he could grip with his specialized limbs. The human students they encountered seemed friendly, but clearly inferior in intellectual capacity. When Kirill demonstrated his ability to perform complex mathematical calculations, through crystal harmonics, the humans responded with amazed applause rather than the casual acknowledgement such a basic skill deserved. When Reef showed how she could analyze water quality by taste alone, the reaction was similar. Buzz's ability to disassemble and reassemble mechanical devices in seconds left the humans speechless. "They're rather easily impressed," Reef whispered to her companions as they sat in the student cafeteria, picking at food that had been specially prepared to meet their dietary requirements. "It's almost endearing," Kirill agreed, "like watching younglings discover basic scientific principles for the first time." Their first formal class was Introduction to Earth Biology, taught by Dr. Torres herself. The lecture hall was filled with human students who took notes with primitive writing instruments on paper made from processed plant matter. The aliens recorded everything through their advanced bioscanners, which could store and cross-reference information faster than any human brain. Dr. Torres began with basic information about Earth's biosphere, single-celled organisms, the development of complex life, evolutionary principles that the aliens had mastered centuries ago. She showed images of various Earth creatures, mammals, birds, reptiles, fish, insects, standard biological diversity, nothing the aliens hadn't seen on dozens of other worlds. Now, Dr. Torres said, clicking to a new slide, who can tell me what makes Earth's ecosystem unique compared to other inhabited worlds? Several human students raised their hands with various answers. Oxygen levels, the presence of water, the diversity of climates. All correct but unremarkable. The aliens remained silent, having no particular interest in participating in such elementary discussion. Those are all good answers, Dr. Torres nodded. But I think you'll find that Earth's real uniqueness lies in something much more interesting, something that even our most advanced visitors often underestimate. Kirill leaned forward slightly, his crystals chiming softly. And what might that be, Dr. Torres? Dr. Torres smiled that same knowing smile from earlier. Adaptability, intelligence, problem-solving capacity. You see, on most worlds, intelligence develops in one primary species that then dominates the ecosystem. But Earth is different. Here, intelligence evolved in multiple species, often in direct competition with each other. Humans didn't become dominant by being the smartest creatures on the planet. They became dominant by learning to coexist with other equally intelligent species. Equally intelligent? Buzz clicked skeptically. Surely you exaggerate. We've reviewed your biological surveys. Most Earth creatures operate on basic instinct. That's what tomorrow's field trip is designed to show you, Dr. Torres replied. We're going to Rocky Mountain National Park, where you'll have the opportunity to observe Earth wildlife in their natural habitat. I think you'll find it quite educational. The aliens spent that evening reviewing their notes and preparing their equipment for the next day's excursion. Their bioscanners were loaded with behavioral prediction algorithms, their emergency beacons were tested and ready, and their translation devices were calibrated for any primitive communication attempts they might encounter. This should be simple. Enough, Reef said, checking her moisture levels one final time before rest period. Observe some basic animal behaviors, catalog their limited problem-solving abilities, and write our reports on primitive Earth fauna. Indeed, Kirill agreed, his crystals dimming as he entered his rest cycle. By tomorrow evening, we should have sufficient data to complete our assignments on Earth's elementary ecosystem. None of them noticed Dr. Torres walking past their dormitory, talking quietly into her communication device. Yes, I know it's short notice, but we have 3 more overconfident visitors who need the full Earth wildlife experience. Can you make sure the usual suspects are active in the morning? The raccoons especially. I have a feeling these students are going to need a really thorough education. The morning sun cast long shadows through the pine trees as the research vehicle wound its way up the mountain road toward Rocky Mountain National Park. Kirill sat in the front passenger seat, his crystalline form reflecting the early light in patterns that danced across the vehicle's interior. Reef had claimed the back seat, her breathing apparatus humming quietly as it maintained her optimal moisture levels. Buzz perched on a specially designed seat that accommodated his insectoid body structure, his compound eyes constantly moving. As they recorded everything they passed, Dr. Torres drove with the casual confidence of someone who had made this trip hundreds of times. In the back of the vehicle, their research equipment was carefully secured. Bioscanners, sample containers, emergency beacons, and enough recording devices to document every aspect of their encounter with Earth's supposedly primitive wildlife. Tapper. Biodiversity in this region is considered typical for Earth's temperate forest ecosystems, Dr. Torres explained as they passed through a grove of aspen trees. You'll see mostly mammals, birds, and insects. Nothing too exotic by galactic standards. Mammals are generally predictable, Kirill noted, consulting his bioscanner. Large brains relative to body size, but limited by emotional responses and basic survival programming. Our behavioral prediction models should easily catalog their activities. Birds are somewhat more interesting, Buzz admitted. Flight patterns require certain computational abilities, but again, basic survival instincts drive most behaviors. Reef adjusted her moisture recycler. Aquatic life would be more challenging, but these terrestrial creatures should present no significant analytical difficulties. The parking area was nearly empty when they arrived, just a few other vehicles belonging to early morning hikers. Dr. Torres led them down a well-maintained trail that wound through dense forest toward a clearing where she said they would likely encounter their first subjects. The aliens walked with the confident stride of beings who had studied ecosystems across 17 different star systems. Remember, Dr. Torres said as they approached the clearing, observation is key. Don't try to interact directly at first. Just watch and record. Let the wildlife get comfortable with your presence. The clearing opened before them, a peaceful meadow surrounded by tall pines. A small stream bubbled along one edge, and several fallen logs provided natural seating. Dr. Torres gestured for them to set up their equipment near the tree line, where they would have good visibility, but remain partially concealed. Kirill activated his bioscanner and immediately began detecting life signs throughout the area. I'm reading approximately 37 individual organisms within scanning range, mostly small mammals and birds, standard forest ecosystem composition. Behavioral patterns appear normal, Buzz reported, checking his own devices. Basic foraging, activities, territorial marking, standard reproductive displays, nothing unexpected. That was when the raccoons appeared. They emerged from the forest like a small army, their distinctive masked faces and ringed tails making them immediately identifiable. There were 5 of them, moving with a coordination that seemed more purposeful than the random foraging behavior the aliens expected. They approached the research equipment with obvious curiosity rather than the typical caution wild animals showed toward unknown objects. Fascinating, Reef murmured, adjusting her scanner settings. They're displaying investigative behavior rather than avoidance. This suggests higher cognitive function than their brain size would indicate. The lead raccoon, a large individual with particularly bright eyes, sat up on its hind legs and studied the alien equipment with obvious intelligence. It tilted its head from side to side, examining the bioscanners from different angles. It appears to be analyzing our technology, Kirill observed, his crystals humming with increased processing power. This level of curiosity is unusual for a creature of this developmental stage. The raccoon approached Buzz's equipment case, which was secured with what the Drex considered a foolproof locking mechanism. Advanced materials, coded sequences, tamper-resistant design, the kind of security that protected valuable equipment. Across civilized space, the raccoon had it open in 12 seconds. That's impossible, Buzz clicked, his mandibles chattering with agitation. That locking system requires a 17-digit code sequence and recognition of specific pressure points. No primitive creature could possibly... The raccoon was already inside the case, examining Buzz's spare bioscanner with what could only be described as scientific curiosity. It turned the device over in its dexterous paws, apparently studying the control interfaces. When it accidentally activated the power switch, the scanner's display lit up with readouts about local flora and fauna. Instead of dropping the device, in fear, as predicted by every behavioral model the aliens possessed, the raccoon appeared delighted. It began pressing different controls, cycling through various display modes with obvious enjoyment. "It's learning the interface," Reef said in amazement. "Look at the systematic way it's testing each control. That's not random behavior. That's experimental methodology." The other raccoons had now surrounded the remaining equipment cases, Working together with obvious coordination, they began attempting to open each container. Their approach was methodical. When one individual tried a technique that didn't work, the others would try different methods rather than repeating the same failure. Kiral watched in growing alarm as his supposedly impenetrable crystal tech container yielded to the combined efforts of 3 raccoons who had somehow figured out that the locking mechanism responded to harmonic vibrations. This is unprecedented. These creatures are displaying problem-solving abilities that rival our own engineering students. The situation escalated when the first raccoon, still playing with Buzz's bioscanner, managed to access the device's communication protocols. Suddenly, the scanner began emitting a series of sounds: bird calls, insect chirps, even what sounded like wolf howls. It's activated the wildlife communication array, Dr. Torres observed calmly. That's actually quite impressive. Most graduate students take weeks to figure out that feature. The sounds had an immediate effect on the forest around them. Birds began gathering in the trees above, their calls responding to the scanner's emissions. Squirrels appeared from various directions, chattering excitedly. In the distance, larger shapes moved between the trees. "Turn it off," Kiral demanded, his crystals flickering with stress patterns. This uncontrolled communication could attract dangerous predators. But the raccoon seemed to understand exactly what it was doing. It continued operating the scanner with increasing confidence, apparently learning to modulate the sounds it was producing. The bird calls became more complex, the insect sounds more varied. It was as if the creature was experimenting with different frequencies and patterns to see what responses it could generate. "Remarkable," Dr. Torres said, making notes on her tablet. "It's figured out that the device can communicate with other species. Now it's testing the limits of that capability." Reef's bioscanner was beeping frantically as it tried to process what it was observing. "My behavioral prediction algorithms are failing. These creatures are operating outside all established parameters for their species." The raccoons had now successfully opened every equipment case and were examining the contents with obvious intelligence and purpose. They passed objects between each other, apparently sharing discoveries and insights. When one individual found something particularly interesting, it would demonstrate its findings to the others. "They're teaching each other," Buzz realized, his voice filled with a mixture of amazement and horror. "That's not supposed to be possible for non-sapient species." Dr. Torres smiled that knowing smile again. "Who told you they were non-sapient? Just because they don't build starships doesn't mean they're not intelligent. Earth's wildlife has been solving complex problems for millions of years. They just solve different problems than we do." The raccoon with the bioscanner had apparently mastered its basic functions and was now pointing it at the aliens themselves. The device's display showed detailed biological readouts, species classification, physiological stress levels, even emotional states. "It's scanning us," Kiral said in disbelief. "A primitive mammal is conducting a scientific analysis of our biology." The raccoon studied the readouts with obvious interest, then showed the display to its companions. They gathered around the device, apparently discussing what they were seeing in their own language of chirps, clicks, and subtle body movements. "I think," Dr. Torres said carefully, "you're beginning to understand why Earth's ecosystem is considered unique. These creatures have been dealing with complex problems and rapidly changing environments for far longer than most civilized species have existed. They've learned to adapt, cooperate, and innovate out of necessity." As if to emphasize her point, the raccoons had apparently decided they were done with their initial investigation. Working together, they carefully returned most of the equipment to its cases, though they kept the bioscanner that had proven so entertaining. The lead raccoon approached Dr. Torres directly, holding up the device as if asking for permission to keep it. "I suppose one scanner won't be missed," she said, reaching into her backpack and pulling out what looked like a handful of treats. She offered them to the raccoon, who accepted the trade with obvious satisfaction. The aliens watched in stunned Silence as the raccoons departed, carrying their new technological acquisition with them into the forest. In the distance, they could hear the continued sounds of the bioscanner being operated by creatures that supposedly lacked the intelligence to understand such devices. "This is just the beginning," Dr. Torres warned as she began repacking their remaining equipment. "Wait until you meet the Ravens." 3 hours later, the aliens had moved their research station to what Dr. Torres called a more interactive location deeper in the park. They had chosen a spot beside a small lake, thinking the water would provide a natural barrier and limit the number of creatures that could approach their equipment. This decision would later be recognized as their first major tactical error. Buzz had spent the morning redesigning their security protocols, creating what he believed were raccoon-proof containers. His new locking mechanisms required not just complex manipulation, but also specific pressure sequences that would be impossible for small paws to execute. "These containers are now completely secure," he announced with obvious pride. "No Earth creature could possibly breach these defenses." Kiral had recalibrated his bioscanners to focus on behavioral prediction, confident that he could anticipate and prevent any future wildlife interference. "I've analyzed the raccoon encounter and updated our response algorithms. We will not be caught off guard again." Reef had established what she called an observation perimeter, using her species' advanced detection technology. Any approaching life forms will be detected and cataloged long before they can interfere with our research. Dr. Torres watched their preparations with the patient expression of someone who had seen this particular brand of overconfidence many times before. "Are you sure you wouldn't prefer to work from the visitor center? It has excellent observation, decks, and much better security." "That would defeat the purpose of field research," Kiral replied, his crystals chiming with certainty. "We need to observe these creatures in their natural environment to properly document their limited capabilities." The first sign that their situation had changed came from above. A single raven landed on a pine branch overlooking their research station. It sat perfectly still for several minutes, apparently studying their setup with the same focused attention a military scout might use to evaluate enemy positions. "Single corvid specimen," Buzz noted, barely glancing up from his equipment. "Standard intelligence for the species. No cause for concern." The raven tilted its head, fixed Buzz with one bright black eye, and made a sound that was unmistakably derisive. Then it took flight, heading deeper into the forest. "Did that bird just mock me?" Buzz asked, his mandibles clicking with confusion. "Don't be ridiculous," Reef replied, though her own bioscanner was showing unusual readings. "Animals don't possess the cognitive complexity for mockery." Within 20 minutes, they understood how wrong that assumption was. Ravens began appearing throughout the forest around them. Not just one or two, but dozens, perching on branches and rocks in positions that provided clear sight lines to the research station. They maintained what could only be described as a surveillance network, with individual birds positioned to observe every angle of approach. "This is concerning," Kiral admitted, his crystals flickering as he tried to process what he was seeing. "Corvids are known for basic tool use and social cooperation, but this level of coordination suggests advanced planning capabilities." The ravens weren't just watching, they were communicating. A complex system of calls echoed through the forest, with different birds apparently relaying specific information to others. The calls had structure, variation, and what sounded disturbingly like tactical coordination. "They're talking about us," Reef realized, her moisture recycler working overtime as stress elevated her respiration. "Those calls aren't random. They're describing our position, our equipment, maybe even our behavior patterns." Dr. Torres pulled out her tablet and began taking notes. "Ravens have been observed using up to 30 different types of calls to communicate specific information. They can share complex details about threats, opportunities, and environmental changes. Some researchers believe their communication system rivals human language in sophistication." "That's impossible," Buzz protested. Language requires abstract thinking, symbolic representation, cultural transmission of knowledge. These are just animals making noise. A raven directly overhead let out a series of calls that sounded remarkably like laughter. The situation escalated when ground forces arrived. Squirrels appeared from multiple directions, moving with obvious purpose rather than the random foraging behavior the aliens expected. They approached the research station in coordinated groups, apparently communicating with the ravens through a system of tail movements and chittering sounds. Interspecies cooperation, Dr. Torres noted approvingly. Ravens and squirrels often work together in the wild. Ravens spot opportunities from above, squirrels investigate from ground level, and they share information about food sources and dangers. But we're not food sources or dangers, Kirol pointed out. We're neutral observers conducting peaceful research. Are you? Dr. Torres asked. You've set up strange equipment in their territory, used devices that emit sounds across multiple frequencies, and demonstrated technology they've never seen before. From their perspective, you could be anything from researchers to invaders to some new type of predator. The squirrels had reached the perimeter of the research station and were examining Buzz's improved security measures with obvious interest. Unlike the raccoons, who had approached with playful curiosity, the squirrels worked with systematic efficiency. They tested each lock mechanism methodically, apparently sharing information about their findings through rapid-fire chattering. They're conducting an engineering analysis, Buzz realized with growing alarm. Look at how they're examining the pressure points and mechanical interfaces. That's not random exploration. That's deliberate investigation. The first container was breached in under 5 minutes. Impossible. Buzz clicked frantically. Those locks require simultaneous pressure on 6 different points with precise timing. No creature without opposable thumbs could possibly... 3 squirrels were already inside the container, passing out pieces of equipment to their companions. They handled each item carefully, examining it with obvious intelligence before deciding whether it was worth keeping or passing along to the ravens for further analysis. The birds, meanwhile, had begun their own form of technical investigation. They swooped down to collect shiny components and interesting-looking devices, carrying them up to their perches for closer examination. Within minutes, pieces of the aliens' research equipment were distributed throughout the forest canopy. They're reverse engineering our technology, Reef said in amazement and horror. They're taking it apart to figure out how it works. The coordinated nature of the operation became clear as the aliens watched ravens and squirrels working together in ways that seemed almost impossible. Ravens would spot interesting equipment and call down specific information to the squirrels. Squirrels would retrieve requested items and pass them up to waiting birds. Both species appeared to have assigned roles and responsibilities in their systematic dismantling of the research station. This is a disaster, Kirol moaned, watching his crystal tech analyzer being carried away by a particularly large raven. That device contains classified Vorthak technology. If these creatures figure out how to replicate crystal harmonics, they won't be able to replicate it, Dr. Torres assured him, but they might learn something interesting from examining it. Earth's wildlife has always been remarkably adaptable when it comes to new technologies. The situation reached peak chaos when the ravens began using their stolen equipment. Somehow, one of them had figured out how to activate a bioscanner. The device's display screen showed clear readings of all the life forms in the area, and the raven operating it seemed to understand exactly what the information meant. It began making specific calls that corresponded to different readouts on the scanner. When it pointed the device at the aliens, its calls changed to what could only be described as warnings or alerts. The other ravens responded by adjusting their positions and increasing their coordination efforts. It's using our scanner to coordinate. Their tactical response, Reef said in disbelief. A bird is using advanced alien technology to improve its species' strategic capabilities. The squirrels, not to be outdone, had apparently figured out how to operate one of the emergency beacons. The device began transmitting on frequencies that attracted even more wildlife. The aliens watched in growing panic as their simple field research mission attracted what appeared to be every intelligent creature in a 5-mile radius. Perhaps, Dr. Torres suggested mildly, we should consider relocating to a less active area. No, Kiral said firmly, though his crystals were flickering, with stress patterns. We came here to study Earth wildlife behavior. This is certainly providing us with adequate data. More than adequate, Buzz agreed grimly, watching a raven use its beak to operate control interfaces with surgical precision. My engineering professors would refuse to believe these reports. Tool use of this sophistication from non-sapient species violates everything we understand about intelligence development. A new sound echoed through the forest, howling. The emergency beacon had apparently reached its intended audience, and something much larger than ravens and squirrels was responding to the signal. Those would be wolves, Dr. Torres said calmly. I should probably mention that they're considerably more intelligent than ravens or squirrels, and they tend to view unusual situations as potential threats to their territory. The aliens looked at each other with expressions that transcended species boundaries. They had come to Earth expecting to study primitive creatures operating on basic instinct. Instead, they found themselves in the middle of what appeared to be a coordinated intelligence operation conducted by species they had dismissed as irrelevant. Dr. Torres, Reef said carefully, exactly how intelligent are Earth's wolves? Dr. Torres smiled that knowing smile one more time. Why don't we find out together? The wolves appeared at the forest edge like shadows given form, their gray and brown coats blending perfectly with the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees. There were 6 of them, moving with the fluid coordination that had made them apex predators for millions of years. Unlike the playful curiosity of the raccoons or the systematic efficiency of the ravens and squirrels, the wolves projected something far more serious. The calm confidence of creatures who had never met anything they truly needed to fear. Kirill's crystals began resonating at frequencies that indicated severe stress. Dr. Torres, these creatures are significantly larger than your previous examples. Our safety protocols may be inadequate. Oh, wolves aren't usually aggressive toward humans, Dr. Torres replied casually, though she was watching the pack with obvious respect. They're incredibly intelligent, though, much more so than most people realize. They've been studying human behavior for over 30,000 years. The pack leader, a large female with intelligent yellow eyes, approached to within 30 feet of their position and sat down. She regarded the chaotic scene of scattered equipment, busy ravens, and frantically working squirrels with what could only be described as thoughtful assessment. Her packmates took positions that clearly weren't random. They formed a loose circle around the research area with sightlines that covered every possible escape route. They're evaluating the situation, Reef observed, her bioscanner trembling in her hands. Look at their positioning. That's not hunting behavior. It's tactical analysis. The alpha female tilted her head and made a low sound that was part growl, part question. Immediately, the ravens in the trees began responding with a complex series of calls. The exchange went on for several minutes, with obvious give and take between the species. They're communicating, Buzz realized, his compound eyes reflecting the light in patterns of amazement and terror. Different species, using different vocal systems, but clearly sharing information. Dr. Torres nodded approvingly. Interspecies communication is much more common on Earth than most people think. Wolves and ravens have been cooperating for millennia. Ravens locate prey and alert wolves to hunting opportunities. Wolves make kills and ravens feed on the remains. It's a partnership based on mutual benefit and shared intelligence. The conversation between wolves and ravens appeared to reach some kind of conclusion. The alpha female stood and approached the research station directly, ignoring the aliens entirely. She examined the scattered equipment with the same systematic attention the other creatures had shown, but with something additional: judgment. She, picked up a piece of Buzz's engineering equipment in her jaws, tested its weight and construction, then set it down with obvious dismissal. She examined Kirill's crystal analyzer, sniffed it thoroughly, and backed away with what looked like distaste. When she reached Reef's bioscanner, however, her entire demeanor changed. The device was still active, showing readouts of all the life forms in the area. The wolf studied the display with obvious comprehension, then looked directly at Reef. The intelligence in those yellow eyes was unmistakable and deeply unsettling. "She understands what the scanner does," Reef whispered. "She knows it's analyzing her, and she's analyzing it right back." The wolf made a series of low sounds that brought her packmates forward. Each wolf examined the bioscanner in turn, apparently learning from their leader's demonstration. When the youngest wolf, barely more than a pup, tried to nose the device too closely, the alpha female corrected him with a sharp growl that clearly meant, "Don't touch." "They're teaching appropriate behavior," Dr. Torres observed. "She's showing her pack how to interact safely with unknown technology while still gathering information about it." The situation became even more complex when the ravens began delivering reports from across the forest. Individual birds would swoop down, land near the alpha female, and make specific calls that she responded to with obvious understanding. After each report, she would look in the direction the raven had indicated, apparently processing information about activities happening far beyond their immediate area. "It's an intelligence network," Kirill said in amazement. "The ravens are functioning as scouts, gathering information from across their territory and reporting back to the wolves." "And the wolves are functioning as decision-makers," Buzz added. "They're processing the reports and making strategic choices based on the information." The next phase of operations began when beavers emerged from the lake. The aliens had forgotten entirely about aquatic life forms, focusing their attention on the obvious threats from the forest. This oversight proved to be critical as a family. Of beavers paddled to shore and began examining the research station from an engineering perspective that made Buzz's previous confidence look like amateur hour. The largest beaver, a massive male with teeth that looked capable of chewing through steel, approached their equipment with the methodical patience of a master craftsman. He didn't attempt to break into containers or steal interesting devices like the other creatures. Instead, he began systematically examining their entire setup: power sources, support structures, data connections, everything that kept their research station functional. "What is it doing?" Reef asked nervously. Dr. Torres watched the beavers' inspection with growing amusement. "Engineering assessment. Beavers are probably the most sophisticated engineers on Earth besides humans. They build complex infrastructure projects that can reshape entire watersheds. They understand structural dynamics, water flow, materials science, and long-term environmental impact." The beaver completed his examination and returned to the water. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then the aliens noticed that the small stream feeding into the lake was changing course. What had been a gentle flow of water was becoming a more directed current, aimed specifically at their research station. "That's impossible," Buzz protested. "Redirecting water flow requires careful calculation of gradient, volume, and soil composition. No animal could possibly—" Water began flowing directly toward their equipment. "They've engineered a flood," Kirill said in disbelief. "Beavers have modified the local hydrology to target our research station. The water wasn't random or destructive. It flowed in carefully controlled channels that avoided damaging the forest environment while systematically soaking everything the aliens had brought with them. Electronic components began shutting down as moisture sensors activated safety protocols. Bioscanners powered off to prevent internal damage. Even their emergency beacons went silent as water reached their control circuits. "Precision engineering," Dr. Torres noted approvingly. "They're disabling your technology without destroying the ecosystem. Very sophisticated work." The wolves watched this operation with obvious approval. When the water reached their paws, they simply moved to higher ground and continued their surveillance. The ravens seemed positively delighted, hopping along the new streams and calling to each other in sounds that could only be described as laughter. Meanwhile, the squirrels had apparently decided that wet equipment was even easier to modify than dry equipment. They began carrying water-damaged components up into the trees, where they started incorporating the alien technology into what looked like some kind of elaborate construction project. "They're building something," Reef observed, watching squirrels weave bioscanner cables between tree branches in complex patterns. Using our equipment as construction material, the ravens had joined this construction effort, carrying larger components to positions that clearly required careful planning and coordination. Within an hour, the trees around the research station were connected by an intricate network of alien technology, modified and integrated in ways that seemed to serve some purpose the aliens couldn't understand. "It's a communication system," Dr. Torres realized. "They've created a technological network using your equipment as components. Look at the pattern: strategic positioning, interconnected pathways, distributed processing nodes. They've built a forest-wide information system." As if to demonstrate her point, one of the ravens activated something that sent signals throughout the network. Lights began flashing in sequence through the trees. Sounds echoed from multiple directions. The bioscanners, now integrated into the system, began displaying information that was being shared across the entire network. "They're using our technology better than we were," Buzz said in horrified admiration. "That network design is more sophisticated than anything my species has developed for wilderness research." The alpha female approached the aliens directly for the first time, water dripping from her paws as she walked through the engineered streams. She sat down in front of them and regarded each alien with those intelligent yellow eyes. When she had their complete attention, she looked pointedly at the modified research station, then at the network in the trees, then back at them. The message was clear: this is our territory. "We understand your technology. We can use it better than you can. What are you going to do about it?" "I think," Dr. Torres said carefully. "They're asking what our intentions are. They've demonstrated their capabilities. Now they want to know whether we're here as friends, competitors, or threats." Kirill's crystals were flickering in patterns that indicated complete system overload. "This entire situation violates everything we understand about intelligence, technology, and interspecies relations. These creatures are operating at cognitive levels that should be impossible for non-sapient life forms." "Maybe," Dr. Torres suggested gently, "your definition of sapience needs updating." The standoff continued for several more minutes, with the alpha female maintaining eye contact with each alien in turn. Finally, she stood and moved to the edge of the modified research station. With careful precision, she picked up one of the few undamaged pieces of equipment, Reef's backup bioscanner. Instead of carrying it away like the other creatures had done with their prizes, she brought it directly to Dr. Torres and set it down, at her feet. Then she sat back and waited. "She's making an offering," Dr. Torres realized. "Or maybe a trade proposal. She's returning some of your equipment as a gesture of good faith." Reef approached cautiously and picked up her scanner. It was undamaged and still functional, though it had clearly been examined thoroughly. The data log showed that it had been activated multiple times and used to scan various creatures throughout the forest. "They've been studying us as much as we've been studying them," Reef said in amazement. "Look at these readings. They've documented our physiological responses, stress levels, even our behavioral patterns during this entire encounter. The wolves had been conducting their own scientific research." The alpha female made another low sound, and the ravens began dismantling parts of their technological network. Not all of it, just specific components that clearly belonged to the aliens' original equipment. Piece by piece, ravens and squirrels began returning modified but functional devices. "They're giving back what they don't need," Dr. Torres interpreted. "Keeping what serves their purposes, returning what serves ours. It's negotiation through demonstration rather than language." Buzz received his engineering tools back, though they had been subtly modified with additional components that seemed to improve their functionality. Kirill's crystal analyzer was returned with new harmonic resonance patterns that actually enhanced its sensitivity. Even the emergency beacons were returned, though they now seem to be integrated with the forest communication network. "They've improved our equipment," Buzz said in wonder. "These modifications are actually superior to our original designs." The alpha female stood one final time and approached Dr. Torres directly. She looked up at the human with those intelligent eyes and made a sound that was clearly a question. Dr. Torres knelt down to the wolf's level. "I think she wants to know if we understand what just happened here. If we've learned what we came to learn." She looked at the three alien students, all of whom were staring at their returned equipment with expressions of complete bewilderment. "Have you?" she asked them. The aliens looked at each other, then at the modified research station, then at the technological network still glittering in the trees above them. Ravens perched on branches, watching them with obvious intelligence. Squirrels sat nearby, their bright eyes reflecting curiosity and amusement. The wolves maintained their positions, patient and alert, clearly waiting for some kind of response. "Don't understand any of this," Kirill admitted, his crystals chiming with confused harmonics. "These creatures have capabilities that shouldn't exist. They've demonstrated engineering skills, tactical coordination, and problem-solving abilities that rival our own advanced civilizations. And they did it without any of the technological infrastructure we consider necessary for intelligence," Reef added. "No cities, no manufacturing, no formal education systems, yet they've outperformed us in our own specialties. Most disturbing of all," Buzz concluded, "they seem to understand us better than we understand them. They predicted our responses, adapted to our technology, and managed this entire encounter according to some plan we never even recognized." Dr. Torres stood and brushed dirt from her knees. "Now you're beginning to understand what makes Earth unique. Intelligence here didn't develop in isolation. It developed in constant interaction with other intelligent species. Humans didn't become dominant because we were the smartest creatures on the planet. We became dominant because we learned to coexist and compete with other species that were just as smart as we were." The alpha female seemed satisfied with this response. She gave a short bark that brought her pack to attention, then led them back into the forest. The ravens followed in coordinated flights, leaving behind only their technological network and the memory of capabilities that challenged everything the aliens thought they knew about intelligence. As the forest settled back into apparent calm, the three students began packing their returned equipment with new respect for the world around them. Every sound from the trees above seemed potentially significant. Every movement in the underbrush might represent intelligence at work. "Dr. Torres," Kirill said finally, "how long have humans been dealing with this level of complexity in your ecosystem?" Dr. Torres smiled her knowing smile one last time. "Since before we were human, really. Our ancestors survived because they learned to read the intelligence around them, to cooperate when possible and compete when necessary. Every human who ever lived has been shaped by the need to coexist with creatures as smart as ourselves." She gestured toward the technological network still visible in the trees. "That's why we're still here, and that's what makes us different from other species you've encountered. We didn't conquer our world, we negotiated with it." 6 months later, the University of Colorado's auditorium was packed beyond capacity. Representatives from 17 different alien civilizations had come to hear the final presentations from the first Earth Wildlife Intelligence Exchange Program. The three original students sat at a panel table, their appearances subtly changed by their extended stay on Earth. Kirill's crystals now resonated at frequencies that seemed more harmonious with natural rhythms. Reef's breathing apparatus had been modified with what looked suspiciously like beaver-engineered components. Buzz's compound eyes held a depth of understanding that hadn't been there before. Dr. Torres introduced each speaker to an audience that included some of the galaxy's most prestigious xenobiologists, cultural anthropologists, and intelligence researchers. The reputation of Earth's primitive ecosystem had undergone dramatic revision since the students' initial reports had reached their respective homeworlds. Kirill spoke first, his voice carrying new harmonics as his crystals interfaced with audio, equipment that bore clear signs of squirrel modification. When we arrived on Earth, we believed intelligence was a rare phenomenon that developed in isolation, reaching its highest form in technologically advanced civilizations like our own. We expected to find one intelligent species, humans, dominating a planet of instinct-driven creatures. He activated a display that showed footage from their first day in the park. The audience watched ravens dismantling alien technology with surgical precision, squirrels conducting engineering analyses that rivaled graduate-level coursework, and wolves coordinating tactical responses that would impress military strategists. Instead, we discovered that Earth's ecosystem represents something unprecedented in galactic civilization, a planet where multiple forms of intelligence have co-evolved in direct competition and cooperation for millions of years. Every creature we encountered demonstrated problem-solving abilities, adaptive learning, and social coordination that challenged our fundamental understanding of cognitive development. The display shifted to show the technological network the forest creatures had built using modified alien equipment. Even 6 months later, the sophistication of the design impressed the audience of advanced civilizations. These creatures didn't just interact with our technology, Kirill continued. They improved it. They integrated it into communication systems, more elegant than anything my people have developed for similar environments. They demonstrated engineering principles that our best designers are still trying to understand. Reef took over the presentation, her voice carrying new confidence. From an evolutionary perspective, Earth represents a unique laboratory for intelligence development. Most worlds produce one dominant intelligent species that then reshapes the environment to suit its needs. Earth instead produced an environment so challenging and dynamic that intelligence became a survival requirement for multiple species simultaneously. Her bioscanner, now decorated with what appeared to be Raven-made modifications that actually enhanced its functionality, displayed comparative data from 17 different worlds. Humans succeeded not because they were uniquely intelligent, but because they learned to navigate a world filled with other intelligent species. Every human innovation, from language to technology to social organization, developed under pressure from creatures who were adapting just as quickly and thinking just as creatively. The audience stirred with interest as Reef showed footage of the beaver engineering project that had flooded their research station. These modifications to local hydrology were completed in under 2 hours using no tools except natural dam building techniques. The precision of the water flow, the calculation of environmental impact, the coordination between multiple individuals. This represents engineering sophistication that many of our civilizations would struggle to match. Buzz concluded the technical presentations with an analysis that had already begun revolutionizing galactic understanding of intelligence and technology. The most significant discovery of our research concerns the relationship between intelligence and technology. We learned that advanced technology is not necessarily a sign of advanced intelligence, and sophisticated intelligence does not require advanced technology. His display showed side-by-side comparisons, Drex machinery capable of reshaping planets next to ravens using simple tools to achieve complex goals, Vorthak crystal computing systems next to Wolfpack coordination that solved problems through pure cognitive ability, Quillen biotechnology next to beaver engineering that worked in perfect harmony with natural systems. Earth's wildlife demonstrated that intelligence is fundamentally about adaptation, problem-solving, and cooperation. Technology is simply one tool among many. These creatures achieved results that impressed our most advanced civilizations using nothing but biological capabilities refined over millions of years of evolutionary pressure. The question period that followed lasted for hours. Representatives from civilizations across the galaxy wanted to understand how Earth's model of multiple competing intelligences could inform their own development. Several species began discussing plans to redesign their colonial expansion strategies, moving away from conquest models toward cooperation frameworks inspired by Earth's ecosystem. How do humans maintain technological advancement when surrounded by such adaptive competitors? Asked a delegate from the hegemony of Kelvar, whose species had achieved dominance through systematic elimination of all other intelligent life on their worlds. Dr. Torres fielded this question herself. Humans advance because of the competition, not despite it. Every human innovation has to work in an environment where other species are constantly adapting and responding. Our technology succeeds only if it can coexist with creatures who are actively trying to understand, modify, or circumvent it. This creates a feedback loop, Kirill added. Human innovation drives adaptation in other species, which drives further. Human innovation, which drives further adaptation. The result is an accelerated development cycle that benefits all participants. A representative from the Crystalline Collective asked about the implications for galactic civilization. If intelligence is as common as your research suggests, how should advanced species interact with worlds we previously classified as primitive? Perhaps, Reef suggested, the classification system itself needs revision. We've learned that complexity of intelligence doesn't always correlate with complexity of technology. A species using simple tools to achieve sophisticated goals may be more advanced than a species using sophisticated tools to achieve simple goals. The final question came from a young researcher whose species had recently achieved interstellar travel. What advice would you give to civilizations that want to learn from Earth's model? The three students looked at each other, then at Dr. Torres, who nodded encouragingly. Start by changing how you define intelligence, Kirill said. Look for problem-solving, adaptation, and cooperation, rather than just technology and infrastructure. Except that you might not be the smartest species in any given environment, Reef added. Intelligence takes many forms, and other creatures may excel in areas where you struggle. Most importantly, Buzz concluded, approach other species as potential partners and teachers, rather than subjects for study or resources for exploitation. The greatest advances come from cooperation between different forms of intelligence. As the presentation concluded, Dr. Torres announced the expansion of the program. The Earth Wildlife Intelligence Exchange would now accept students from across the galaxy, with curricula designed around direct interaction with Earth's diverse ecosystem. The waiting list already included representatives from over 40 civilizations. The three original students returned to their home worlds as ambassadors of a new understanding of intelligence and cooperation. Within a year, the Vorthak had established cooperative research programs with the intelligent crystal formations on their mining worlds. The Quillen began communicating with the deep-sea entities they had previously ignored in their ocean cities. The Dreks started collaborating with the mechanical life forms that had evolved in their automated factories. Earth's reputation transformed from a primitive backwater to the galaxy's premier destination for intelligence studies. Civilizations that had previously planned to conquer or ignore Earth now competed for opportunities to learn from its unique ecosystem. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. The galaxy began to understand that intelligence wasn't a ladder with advanced civilizations at the top and primitive species at the bottom. Instead, intelligence was an ocean, with countless different forms of depth and complexity, each adapted to different environments and challenges. And at the center of that ocean was Earth, where intelligence had learned not just to survive, but to thrive through cooperation, competition, and mutual respect between species that had been making each other smarter for millions of years. Dr. Torres kept one final note from her files, a message from Kirill written on his last day on Earth. We came here believing we were advanced beings studying primitive creatures. We learned that we were primitive beings studying advanced creatures. The difference was not in our technology, but in our understanding of what intelligence truly means. The forest network still operated in Rocky Mountain National Park, a permanent collaboration between Earth wildlife and alien technology. Visitors often reported seeing ravens operating bioscanners, squirrels maintaining communication arrays, and wolves conducting what appeared to be guided tours for new alien students. The title of Dr. Torres' final report to the Galactic Educational Consortium became the motto for Earth's new position in galactic civilization. Intelligence is everywhere. Wisdom is learning to recognize it.